Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Monday Motivation Spotlight. I'm so excited to be here today. I'm Lesley Kaplan. Today, we have an awesome lineup. For those of you that have seen, we have a double event today. So if you're joining live, stick around for both of these sections. And if you're watching the recording, you'll be able to see the separate link on my YouTube channel. So what do? Monday Motivation Spotlight. We meet every single Monday, highlighting special individuals, business owners, organizations that live in Israel, the aim being to support Israel during the war. We started this podcast and program during the war and for the war to inspire and motivate us, and at the same time, to give exposure to Israelis who, especially at the time, were undergoing a very difficult and challenging time business-wise for most people in the industry. So we're all about inspiration, enrichment, and today we have a fabulous guest who I'm going to highlight in just a moment. What we do too is you stay muted, although this part is not an official networking group. The second part is feel free, if you have a business, to write your details in the chat and to connect with people there too. Feel free to ask our speaker any questions, and feel free as well to connect with others, comment on anything that our speaker is saying. Thank you also to our co-host, ACI, as always, and to our sponsor this month, Lali's Flower Boutique in Jerusalem. So without further ado, I'm going to co-spotlight our guest for the day, who may be familiar to many of you, and for some of you not, although I'm sure that she is, Henny Shor, who is known as In the Kitchen with Henny. She's a kitchen coach. She has a fabulous column in the Jerusalem Post, which is actually where I got to meet and hear of you through Henny. And I will share a little secret with you, although it's not such a secret if I'm sharing it live, that I'm not crazy about being in the kitchen. I don't particularly like cooking, but what I will say is that I love the kitchen shows. I love the Master Chef and everything else. I never missed an episode, and I like looking at recipes. So I guess deep down, maybe I do enjoy something about being in the kitchen. And what I do like about your recipes and about your column is that they're very down to earth. And I know that your whole idea is that you want to make it easy for people to, get their food on the table. And some of your recipes are more advanced than others, but I recognize the names of the ingredients. That was one thing sometimes on MasterChef, they'd mention names, and I'd sit there with my Google Translate, and even in English, I didn't understand what the ingredient was. So Henny, we're delighted to have you. Thank you for joining us. Share with us who is Henny Shor, a little bit about your Aliyah story, cooking tips, recipe tips, anything inspirational. And we will be going through until 9:25. Okay. Afterwards, we will take a 5-minute break, and then you're all invited to join us and stay with us for the second half. All right, Henny, take it away. Good morning.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Lesley. That was a very wonderful introduction. Good morning, everybody. It's so wonderful to see everyone this morning. And so I actually just celebrated my 20th Aliyah anniversary, which is really, I'm still like mind blown about it. And it seems like yesterday, and also seems like a lifetime ago at the same time that my feet hit the ground. My first trip to Israel, I was turning 10. I was exactly the same age my daughter is now. She's turning 10 this summer. And my family came for the entire summer, we came to Israel in 1981. So now you know how old I am. And my parents had never been on a plane. They've never been to Israel. None of us had ever been on a plane. And we all came for the summer of 1981. We rented an apartment instead of staying in a hotel. We rented like a dorm, like a Sharfman's. It's a seminary in Sanhedria, Mochevet. We rented an apartment. We wanted to live like Israelis. And we got here on a Thursday night. Friday morning, we walked through the darkest of the Arab shuks that you could get to. Remember, it was like really dark back then, and so many twists and turns. And then all of a sudden you get out and you're on the top of the steps there facing the Kotel, and the light is like shining in my eyes. And it's something I haven't forgotten in all these years. And just going down there and being there was the first time that I actually felt like there was home. It was home to me. I grew up in Brooklyn. I never felt that was really home. It wasn't my place. It wasn't something that I really felt connected to. But when I came here, even at that age, before turning 10, I felt very connected, and I knew that this was a place that I was going to want to end up being. And towards the end of the summer, my father, none of us wanted to leave. But my parents at the time couldn't, they had parents back home, they had jobs back home, and they had to go back, and we all went back. And I think I went kicking and screaming, but we went back, and I knew I would always end up here. And then it took me about another 23 years. I came for a trip in between for a summer, but it took me till I was about 32 until I finally came in 2004. And I have been here ever since. To me, the biggest, I guess, aha moment, or the biggest realization of what I was doing, was when I'm sitting on the plane, and then you're like, they say, okay, you're starting to land, and I wasn't on a Nefesh B'Nefesh flight. I made Aliyah. My official Aliyah was a few months later, but to me, that's my official Aliyah, because that's when I came, and I knew I was moving here. It was just a matter of paperwork. So I wasn't on a Nefesh B'Nefesh flight. I was on a regular flight. And I remember just as we're getting ready to, get our stuff together to get off the plane, and all of a sudden I put my hands in my pockets, and there are no keys. There's no car keys. There's no house keys. There's no office keys. There was no keys. And it was this like, what did I do? What did I do? I just like left everything behind. And then I took a deep breath, and I was like, you don't need keys when you're going home. And to me, that was the biggest, okay, I'm okay because I'm going home. And thank God my brother and his family had made Aliyah about 8 or 9 months before me. So I had a soft landing in that sense. He picked me up from the airport with a big balloon, and I got to stay at their place. I was there for about 2-3 days until I found a little rental to get me through the summer. And then I found something more long-term, because I wanted to be in Jerusalem, and they live in Elazar. I studied for a year at Neve at first, even though I was much older. I wanted to get my year in seminary, which I never really did beforehand. And so I studied for a year, and I was trained as a graphic artist at the time. And after a year, my father had mentioned that there's this new magazine, Mishpacha magazine, that now starts in English. Maybe I should send them a resume. And I was like, okay, it can't hurt. I sent a resume, and then about, 10 minutes later, I got a call from the art director asking me, if you want the job, it's yours. So apparently they were looking for a graphic artist I didn't even know. And I worked there for about 3 years. In my second year there, I moved up to art director, as he had left at that point. And then I basically stayed there until I met my husband. And the day I told him I was engaged was the day I was like, adios, because it was a very full-time job. It was sometimes, as an art director, I was working around 70 hours a week. It was insane, but I was single at the time, and the only responsibilities I had was a dog. So I hired a dog walker to come in the afternoons, because I would leave in the morning and get home really late at night. And then once I met my husband, and he hadn't made Aliyah yet, and he had to be for work in the States for 2 years. And I was really nervous about, this 2 years turn into 10 years. We've all heard those stories of, oh, it's just 2 years. And I just kept praying that it wouldn't be longer. So we got married in the States, and then thank God, I mean, for me, it's thank God. For a lot of people, it wasn't. The financial crash of 2008 happened, and he actually worked for an organization here in Israel, but he was running their New York office. And once the crash happened, it wasn't feasible for them to keep the New York office open, because the New York office is a fortune, and they knew he was coming over eventually. So within 6 or 7 months after we got married, I was already back. It was less than a year that I was in Israel that whole time, and that I was in America that whole time. And we even came for about 3 weeks in the middle of that. So even though I wasn't here for maybe 5 months, was the longest stretch. It was actually a very painful stretch, even though here I was finally married at the age of 37 and all excited. It was very hard being away from Israel. And so thank God by the next June already, we were back here. And we now have a daughter who's turning 10, which is insane to believe. And during Corona, just like we all have to pivot ourselves, during Corona, I wasn't really working, because once my daughter was born, I stopped working. And so I was a full-time mom for 3 years, which was the best 3 years. And I don't regret a second of it. No matter what financial hardships we had from that, it was worth it. I only look back at those 3 years with the best of memories. And I feel very blessed that I was able to do that. It was at a high price, but we're very grateful we were able to do that. And then when she went to Gan at about 3 is when I started to be like, okay, what am I going to do with my life? What am I going to do? I didn't want to go back into graphics. I didn't want to sit in an office all day. I wanted to do something, more interactive. I had been trained actually as a wig stylist when I was in my teens. So and that was a side business I always had. So I had picked that up again, doing some haircuts and that. And then I had opened up, I was always had an entrepreneurial soul, I guess. I had opened up an English chug in my home, in my neighborhood, because I wanted my daughter to learn English. So why don't I teach other children and get paid for it? So I did that for a while. And then when Corona hit, so I continued the chug, but it was on Zoom, which was obviously very hard teaching 4- and 5-year-olds on Zoom, but it was already, in March, it was mostly through the year. So we did finish. And interestingly enough, we were up to the letter Q at that point, and we all were like, Q is for quarantine, which was the big word back then. And then kind of after that, I finished that through the year, I was like, we were trying to figure out what to do. And every now and then I would, we would do a lot of cooking because I kept my daughter home for about 6 months. She didn't go back to school until September when she started 1st grade. And in those few months, we did a lot of, at home experiments and cooking and all different kinds of things and stories and activities. And we, make the living room into a beach and have fun, kind of things like that. And we would just start doing a lot of cooking stuff, me and my daughter, and people kept saying they love it, they love it, they love my cooking things, and people kept reaching out to me. I mean, even before this, thank God I'm a good cook, and people have always enjoyed my food, and I've always gotten calls on Friday of how do I make this and how do I do that, and I've also done a lot of challah bakes, so people would ask a lot about challah questions. And then, so during Corona, this whole thing about cooking started, and I said to myself, I'm like, is there such a thing as a cooking coach, like a kitchen coach? And I went online and I couldn't really find anything. There's a lot of people that cook and they give you recipes, but is there anyone that really takes somebody and says, this is the, takes them side by and says, this is how we can menu plan and this is how you can make things easier, not just recipes, but like how to make the whole kitchen run smoothly, how to, shop knowing that you're not going to spend a lot more money. I learned something that every time you go into a store, they get you to spend money you don't need to spend, right? The supermarket industry spend millions and billions of dollars a year to get you to buy things that you don't really need, but it's there. And that's how they display it. And I learned this because I had gone shopping. I did my whole Rami Levy shopping and it was sent with delivery and I was on my way home, but the peppers there weren't looking so great. I wanted to get peppers. So on the way home, I stopped at a little fruit market for peppers. And I spent 140 shekels. And that's when I was like, oh, this is a problem. You can't go into a store, right? So I have worked out a system where I go to the store once a week. If I need to go for refills, like vegetables or fruits that have, need to be replenished, I go with a very different mentality with a certain amount of money, and that's all. But I've really, really learned, and I teach women how to menu plan so that you can you only have to shop once a week. But if you shop once a week, but you have no idea what you're making, you're going to end up back at the supermarket the next day. And you're going to spend 140 shekels on peppers or 300 shekels on tomatoes. Whatever it is, you're going to end up spending a lot more because you're going to see things, even though you don't need them. So I just started thinking like, wow, maybe people who are getting married need to learn more about cooking and running a kitchen. Or what about people who are new to being, religious and want to know how to make kugel or challah or cholent or like the real Hamish type foods. And I also noticed, like, when I see recipes that have like 20 ingredients, my head just, I have ADHD, so it just doesn't work. I'm just like out of it. And I'm like, I need something simple, but not simple where you just take barbecue sauce and throw it on something. I like using real food. I don't like using processed foods. If you want to make a nice sauce on something, there's Ceylon, which is date honey. There's, there's garlic. There's fresh ingredients that you can use to give you even a higher taste than you can get from any barbecue sauce, and know that it's a lot healthier with less sugar and less sodium and all that other stuff. And I just realized there was a need for people to learn how to navigate a kitchen without it being overwhelming. And then as women, as we all are, like, we are working a lot more than our moms and grandmothers did. We're working more, and we're working longer hours. And there's just also a lot more going on. The kids have a lot more than just school. There's there's chugim, and there's this, and the world itself has become so fast paced and filled with so many things that there are less hours in the day. So having to spend an hour making dinner is not ideal for anybody. And honestly, it's not even about making the dinner, it's the decision. And when you come home at 4 o'clock, if you don't know what you're making for dinner, you've got like a massive migraine going, and you know, your family's looking at you, and you yourself are feeling the hunger pains, and you're so hungry, or hangry, as I like to call it, that you don't really know what to do with it. And you want to be able to stop and say, okay, let me make a plan of what I'm making for the next week. Let me make a plan now. So I only make a shopping list based on that. I go shopping and I don't have to walk back in the supermarket again. Even if you're doing online shopping, you do 1 shop a week as opposed to 10. So I asked a friend, we were taking a walk, and I said, what do you think about like me being a kitchen coach? And she looked at me and she was like, you mean like helping people in the kitchen? I was like, yeah. She goes, sign me up. And she actually was came to one of my first workshops that I did, which was a 3-part on just basics of getting through the kitchen. And now I coach women one-on-one. I actually now have a group challenge that's, instead of a one-on-one, it's more of a group setting, but it's basically the same benefits. And it's called the Yum and Done Challenge, where it's all about getting it yum and done very quickly, but also to be healthy, and also to be real foods, and also to give your family that whole food, you know, that mealtime that at least I grew up with mealtime. I don't know how many of you grew up with mealtime, where you actually all sat at the table with your family. So I did, and a lot of families aren't doing that now. So I feel it's very important. I want to bring mealtime back. Whatever your family dynamic is, whether it's 1 person or 10 people, like, let's sit down and actually eat dinner. Let's shut off all devices. We have this saying in our house, "B'tei avon," shut off the phone. Because let's actually spend the next 20 minutes together without, you know, Shabbos is amazing. Thank God we have that, but let's do it during the week as well. Let's have a few times where we actually talk about what happens to our day and how we're feeling and what's going on. And let's eat healthy foods together. So that's really how it all happened. And I love writing recipes that people could make. I love writing recipes that I can make. I research different recipes. Like when I want to make a certain dish, I'll read around 10 different recipes of that. And then I will condense it into the simplest form that it can be made. Every now and then I will do something that's a bit patchky. Like last year I wrote about blintzes, and I warned everybody, it is simple. It's 3 different steps. So if you have the time, great. But if you don't, that's fine. But it wasn't overwhelming if you take it into steps. So I don't know, does anyone have any questions?
I do. So I'm a really good cook, and I know my way around the kitchen, but I am in the grocery store way too much. And like I wrote sometimes twice a day shortly after I just went because I forgot. So I would love like some guidance in reference to that.
Right. So the best thing to do is, first of all, in the chat, I put down a,
You may want to just recopy the link in.
Yeah, I am.
Those
I'm
that joined
going
afterwards
to-
won't have seen it. Would you like me to do that for you?
Let's see if I got
Or
it.
you can do it.
Okay.
Just
Okay, so
copy
I
and
just put a
paste
link
it.
in for a meal, it's a cheat sheet meal planner, which basically it's a meal planner, but I give you like ideas on what you can do, but you could just ignore them and do your own. But you know, you can fill out that and you'll get one in your email soon. And then what I suggest is meal planning. It changes things. It'll take you maybe the first week, 15 minutes. But by the end, in around 2-3 weeks, it'll take you 5 minutes to do. I suggest always doing it either Matzah Shabbos or Sunday morning, taking 5 minutes, sitting down, writing what you're making for dinner every single night, and include what you're making for Shabbos. And be aware that Matzah Shabbos Sunday night, you might not know how many guests and how many things. So do an option. You know, do if you're making chicken, so you can make chicken for 5 people, you can make chicken for 20 people. You know, if you're doing a brisket, you could just make a bigger bit. Like it's you can adjust it for more people. And then certain things might change throughout the week, but you know, make it flexible. Do a menu plan. Once you have that menu plan, and I talk about including your mains, your sides, your salads, what vegetables you're putting in your salad, what ingredients are going to be on the dressings. Okay, like really on the side of that, just as you're writing it, then write down every ingredient that you need. Whether you have it in their house or not, just write it down, because then you can go and do kitchen inventory and see, okay, what do I need to actually buy? But I have all the ingredients for everything I need that and that I'm going to use for the next week. And I usually suggest shopping on Tuesdays or Wednesdays because things are very fresh still on Tuesday and Wednesday. The supermarkets aren't as crowded. Monday is also an option, but it's not those fruits and vegetables might not last through Shabbos. Tuesday, usually, yes. Wednesday for sure. And so what if you're putting the chicken that you bought on Wednesday in the freezer if you want to, if you're not making it until Friday, that's fine. But I suggest shopping Tuesday, Wednesday, even if you're doing an online order. So then I would suggest putting it in on Monday so you get it Tuesday or Wednesday. And then this way you're shopping, when you're making that menu plan, you're making it from everything that week, and it's going to include everything through the next Monday or Tuesday, the day that you pick to shop. So you're making a menu plan and you're including everything through till the next Tuesday. And then you're going to do that shopping list, and then you're going to be able to go shopping. And yeah, you might need to send somebody, you might need to go to the fruit store, and you'll say to yourself, I am only getting peppers. And you'll say it 10 times and you will pay saying you're only getting peppers, and you'll walk out. And it's a training that you need to do. But when you, exactly like you said, you go to the grocery store, you think you have everything for dinner, you come home, you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot the eggs, and you need to run out. And then you bought a lot more than just eggs. And at this point you come home and you're like, I'm too tired to cook. And then you just call Burgers Bar. And the wall guy knows you by name already. So it's all about an organization, that it being organized, not just in, what you're making, but everything around it. And sometimes if it takes time to, make a menu plan, I suggest making, a meal index first, like make a list of all the chicken recipes that you like to make a list of all the soups you like to make a list of all the meats you like to make a list of all the vegetarian dishes you like to make, and have that hanging inside your cabinet. So when you're saying, what chicken should I make this week? You could just look up and say, oh, you know what, let's do that. We haven't done that chicken in a while. Or, oh, let's make that salad. We haven't done that in a long time. So making a meal index is also something I do with my clients. And then we go on for meal index, and then we do one for Shabbat, one for weekday and Shabbat, because they're different. Sometimes they overlap for sure, but we do that. And then, so if you do that, if you build a menu plan and then you make your shopping list based on that with all the ingredients, you will find yourself shopping less. You will be saving so much money and so much time, because shopping takes a lot of time.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Henny Shor. As we said in the
You're
beginning, you're not a regular, column. The fact that you're a kitchen coach and you help women with all these kind of things, and you're not just putting out the fancy recipes there that some of us, as I mentioned before, don't even know the name or how to pronounce the name. Right. So ladies, and normally it's ladies and gents, but today is more of a women's program with the type of speaker that we had in the beginning, as well as our follow-on, which is for women. Thank you so much to our special guest, Henny Shor, for joining us on the Monday Motivation Spotlight. It's been awesome having you. Don't log off. I'm going to officially end this program, and we're going to have a 5-minute break before we start the next. Do you want to just say one thing, Henny?
I just want to... well, I'll add, the chat box will still be open. I also want to add, I started my Yum and Done challenge already 2 weeks ago. We're 2 weeks in, but anyone can join and they would just continue for another 2 weeks. So I'm going to put a link for that if somebody wants to register. And registering doesn't mean you're like fully have to pay or whatever. It means that like you're registering interested, and then we can speak and I can sign you up. So I am going to just send that in as well. It's just a group of women that we're all in the same situation where we want to get dinner on the table easily. We don't want to spend our Fridays sweating in the kitchen, and we want things to just run smoother. And that's what
flow. Absolutely. And even though I'm going to pause the recording between the two sessions, the chat is staying open and it's the same chat. So feel free also at the beginning of the next session, when people join for that, to add it. All right, ladies, and sometimes the gents, if you're listening to the recording, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Lesley Kaplan. You've been listening to the Monday Motivation Spotlight. If you're new to the Monday Motivation Spotlight, join us every single week live. There is a definite added advantage of joining live. You feel the vibe. If you're not able to join live, then this is available on my YouTube channel. Just type in Monday Motivation Spotlight or Spotify. Thank you once again to Henny, our guest. Thank you to AC.
Thank you, Lesley.
And thank you to our sponsors for the month, Lally's Flower Boutique in Jerusalem. So I'm going to officially end off the recording for the Monday Motivation Spotlight, but don't log off as you normally would, because we're going to introduce our second part of the day. Am Yisrael Chai, may we know only smachot, no more problems, no more challenges, and no more waking up to bad news every day. See you in a moment.